Everyone is looking at the wrong problem. In 2025, world leaders stood in front of cameras, warning us about inflation, elections, recession fears. But behind the noise, a far quieter threat was already forming. A threat that doesn't begin with a crash. It begins with silence. While headlines screamed about markets and politics, something deeper, something slower, was tightening around households, banks, and governments across the world. And by the time most people notice it, the damage is already done. Today, we break down the one crisis almost no one sees coming, the silent crisis of 2026. Before we begin, if you value understanding the systems that quietly shape your life, take a moment to subscribe. We explore these stories every week, calmly, clearly, without noise. So let's begin with a simple question. Why does a crisis without headlines become the most dangerous kind of all? To understand this crisis, we need to step away from the headlines, away from the noise, and look at the numbers nobody talks about. Because the silent crisis doesn't begin in markets. It doesn't begin with CEOs or politicians. It begins quietly, inside the balance sheets of ordinary households. Over the past 4 years, something unprecedented has happened. For the first time in modern economic history, global household cash flow turned negative. People are earning less, spending more, saving almost nothing, and borrowing at the fastest rate in decades. Economists call it a structural imbalance, but for ordinary people, it feels much simpler. Every month, I fall a little further behind. But here's where the real danger forms, not in the struggle itself, but in the timing. Because all of this, rising debt, falling savings, shrinking incomes, collides directly with the year 2026. Why 2026? Because it is the year when the financial pressure built since 2020 finally comes due. Deferred loans expire, emergency savings disappear, government support programs vanish, and interest rates remain painfully high. A slow-moving crisis, quietly accelerating toward a breaking point. A breaking point almost no one sees, because it doesn't look like a crash. It looks like life. So why does the silent crisis break open in 2026 and not 2024 or 2025? Because three slow, powerful forces are moving toward each other, and they all collide. Next year, the first force is simple and brutal: the end of cheap credit. For more than a decade, money was practically free. 0% interest rates, easy mortgages, cheap credit cards. But those days are gone. In 2026, households face the highest borrowing costs in 2 decades. Mortgages reset, variable rate loans jump, credit card interest hits levels not seen since the 1990s. The second force is less visible, but even more dangerous. The debt wave of 2020 and 2021 finally comes due. During the pandemic, governments delayed payments, froze loans, and injected trillions into the system to keep it alive. But all they really did was buy time. In 2026, that time runs out. Student loans, small business loans, emergency credit lines, all returning at once. And then comes the third force, the one no politician wants to admit. Governments can't intervene anymore. America enters 2026 with record deficits. Europe faces an energy debt spiral. China battles the aftershocks of a collapsing property sector. In every major economy, the same truth appears. The governments that once rescued their people now need rescuing themselves. And when these three forces converge, expensive credit, expiring debt, and weakened governments, you don't get a sudden crash. You get something slower, darker, and far harder to escape. You get the silent crisis. There is a reason you rarely hear governments talk about this crisis. It isn't dramatic. It doesn't explode on live television. It just spreads. Politicians don't warn you about slow crises because slow crises destroy approval ratings. A recession can be blamed on someone. A crash can be explained, but a silent decline feels like a failure of leadership. So instead of sounding the alarm, they change the conversation. They talk about inflation. They talk about unemployment. They talk about geopolitical threats. Meanwhile, the real warning signs hide in plain sight, in the data they quietly publish, hoping no one reads it closely. Household debt-to-income ratios climbing to record highs. Small business bankruptcies accelerating. Savings rates collapsing. Delinquency rising in every age group. And then there is the number almost nobody mentions: the global liquidity gap. Liquidity, the oxygen of the financial system, is evaporating faster than central banks expected. Banks are lending less. Investors are holding cash. Governments are issuing record amounts of debt. But buyers are disappearing. It is the kind of imbalance that doesn't cause an explosion, but a suffocation. A crisis that doesn't announce itself with a crash. It appears through a slow tightening, month after month, until families, businesses, and governments all reach their limit. This is the part of the crisis politicians won't say out loud. Because once people understand what a liquidity squeeze really means, they realize how fragile the system has become. So how will the silent crisis of 2026 reach you? Not through breaking news, not through a dramatic market crash, but through the smallest parts of your everyday life. It starts quietly, when your rent increases faster than your paycheck, when your grocery bill feels heavier each month, when a single unexpected expense, a repair, a medical bill, a late fee, suddenly throws your entire month off balance. For millions, the crisis won't feel like a disaster. It will feel like pressure, a gradual tightening, a slow loss of financial breathing room. You may notice credit card minimum payments rising, banks becoming stricter, job openings shrinking, raises disappearing. And then there is the emotional side, the part economists never measure, the stress of watching savings melt faster than you can replace them, the fear of not being able to support your family, the frustration of doing everything right and still falling behind. In a silent crisis, people don't lose hope all at once. They lose it slowly, piece by piece, as the margin for error disappears. But that's also why understanding the mechanism matters, because silent crises reward one type of person, the person who prepares quietly, before everyone else realizes what's happening. And if you know what's coming, you can position yourself not just to survive the silent crisis, but to grow through it. Every crisis has two sides, a breaking side and an opportunity side. Most people only notice the breaking, the rising bills, the tightening budgets, the uncertainty. But the few who understand the deeper mechanics, they see something different. Silent crises reshape the entire financial landscape. They shift power from the unprepared to the prepared, from those who react to those who anticipate. And that is where your advantage begins. Knowledge becomes a shield. Discipline becomes a strategy, and clarity becomes an edge. In the coming episodes, we will break down how to protect your savings, how to understand the signals before they reach the news, and how to position yourself for the world that emerges after 2026. The goal is simple: not fear, but preparation; not panic, but understanding. If this gave you clarity, stay close. We explore these hidden mechanics every week, calmly, clearly, and without noise. Welcome to Financial Room.